When someone you know is stuck and trapped in an abusive relationship, it's hard to know what to say or what to do. Please don't show up for someone with the misunderstanding that it is easy for anyone to leave an abusive relationship. It's not. It is not as simple as what your judgments suggest. Please never diminish anyone's pain and heartache by asking, why don't you just leave? Anyone who asks this question has no idea how difficult it actually is. Because money is oftentimes a huge factor. It's not the only reason why many of us stay. There is never a guarantee that someone who leaves will stay gone. Someone who leaves their abuser doesn't just get out one time and says, okay, that's it, I'm out for all time. No, someone who is emotionally and physically abused has undergone a psychological warfare that is equal to a living hell. And most oftentimes, if and when they do leave, they will return. This is a pattern that repeats itself more than once, more than twice, more than thrice. The average a person leaves and returns to the abusive relationship is about 9 times before a final decision is made to leave for good. Now, these statistics are not in anyone's favor. Each time someone returns to their abuser, the abuse worsens. The disrespect deepens because the narcissist is left with a deep wound that reminds them of how they were rejected and abandoned as a child. And so now, when their target returns, payback is always a bitch. It's methodical and hidden. It's a sick and twisted maneuver of pitting the emotional dependence on their target to create a greater trauma bond that does greater damage. It's payback that keeps giving. Usually when the target returns to their abuser for the first time, they are convinced that things are different. Against the sage advice of friends and family members, they go back. And when the abuse starts up again, this is often hidden as the abuser does their best to isolate and separate their target from loved ones. And the target makes excuses and wears layered clothing and covers up bruises and cancels plans, all in attempts to not appear to be burdening and disappointing to friends and family. And it doesn't help that the narcissist sets up damage control through triangulation. By the time the target of abuse decides to leave the unhealthy relationship, this doesn't mean that they are leaving emotionally healthy. There's the trauma bond and cognitive dissonance to think about. Not only that, there's Stockholm syndrome, infantile regression, PTSD. The cyclical pattern of abuse does not stop just because the target leaves the abusive environment. And when they find themselves alone, the rumination starts up. And in order to stop this cycle of rumination, they go back to their abuser to stop the internal psychological warfare, just to alleviate their guilt and shame and their own abandonment and rejection fears. When the target of abuse decides to leave for good, they have had enough. They know enough to know that they have been traumatized and that their victimization was a form of control from their abuser. Now, the last time they may leave, that might be their last, but not in the ways that you might think. Although the target may be strong enough to leave, the narcissist is all about control and many have psychopathic tendencies that are criminal. Some men and women who are abused may make it out alive, but just barely. And their freedom is short-lived because the narcissist cannot take rejection. They cannot live with the abandonment of their targets. So, please, next time someone says to you or you hear in passing conversation, why don't they just leave already? Please take a moment and be a voice for the voiceless. Speak up and offer a solution or a helping hand by saying, instead of offering our judgment to this person, let's put our heads together to brainstorm to find a way to physically and emotionally support and meet this individual's needs. Let's help them to believe that they are not alone. Emotional isolation is debilitating, my friends, and when you're the target of abuse, you feel emotionally abandoned, isolated, and confused. You cannot think calmly or rationally because your filters for normalcy are all but depleted. The narcissist and their trauma do that to you. The isolation is more than debilitating, and that's kind of the reason, part of the reason why we go back to our abusers. Because the trauma bond has us reflecting on the moments of safety and protection when we were with our abuser. And we do this more than reflecting on the moments of them harming us. And so we return to the one who abused us, convinced in our minds that they will protect us as they have before. This is what we learn to trust. We learn a sense of safety and protection, even though it's irrational, but we go back to them because we look for that protection and safety when we're alone and when we're afraid. When we are trauma bonded to our abusers, whomever they might be or whomever they have been, it's very difficult to place our trust in our own thoughts, let alone our own judgment, when we're taught by the narcissist to abandon ourselves. So let's be kinder to each other out there, yeah? Blessings.